All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Glendale City Council Workshop Session of April 13, 2021. Meeting is called to order. We will go ahead and conduct an attendance roll call. You'd call roll, please.
Councilmember Aldama. Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Melnar.
Present.
Councilmember Tomachov.
Here.
Councilmember Turner.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hugh.
Here.
Mayor Wires.
I am here. Thank you. Moving on to item number one. Ms. Rabin, would you go ahead and introduce that, please?
Item 1, establishment and implementation of a Veterans Court in the City of Glendale.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Good afternoon. Today I've been asked to respond to a council special item of interest, and that is to explore a Veterans Court, what will be necessary for the implementation of a Veterans Court. So, without further ado, this was a special item of interest for the mayor, and I am responding to that, I believe, in a timely manner. I've done a lot of research with respect to veterans courts nationally, and I tried to focus on veterans courts throughout the state of Arizona. And one of the things that I've done initially is developed a mission statement. I'm going to tell you that I didn't reinvent the wheel. I looked at the mission statements of the other veterans courts and tried to take what I thought were the best aspects of it. And that is the mission statement that I want to embrace. The mission will be to enhance public safety and to provide justice while reducing recidivism. That is the primary purpose of the Veterans Court. What I've learned is that a Veterans Court is not a panacea. It is not going to immediately reduce crime. What it will do is it will be an effective treatment of crime-involved veterans. What I've learned is that nearly 95% of veterans in the criminal justice system have a substance abuse problem. And what I've heard from many of the veterans courts is that they find that the sobriety rate that they achieve with their participants is as high as 92%. But more importantly, what they report is that the recidivism rate in regular court is between 70 and 80%. So you're seeing the same faces over and over again. Veterans courts nationally report a recidivism rate of about 25%. That's the public safety benefit. The benefit is you will probably see these faces less frequently in the future. Veterans Court is not a new idea. The first Veterans Court was established in, of all places, Buffalo, New York in 2008. The first one in Arizona was established in Lake Havasu City in 2013. There is an effort underway in the Maricopa County Justice Court system to have a Veterans Court. They will accept cases only from justice courts. So there are 26 justice courts in the county of Maricopa, and the vision is that one of the justice courts, the one up in Surprise, will host justice court and accept transfers of cases from the other justice courts. But it will not provide services to the municipal courts. An administrative order was issued by the Maricopa County Superior Court in 2018 authorizing an East Valley Regional Veterans Court. The initial members were Cave Creek, Carefree, a consolidated court, Chandler, a rather large court about the size of ours, Fountain Hills, Gilbert, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, and Tempe. I could tell you that there is an interest in a West Valley regional court. I've gotten a number of contacts asking about joining and about providing support. The plan is to leverage VA support and VA benefits to the extent possible. The VA will commit to having a Veterans Outreach social worker present in our Veterans Court, if we go forward, initially once a month. They have a person now that is a liaison for other courts, and they're willing to make that commitment, 1 day a month initially. As our court grows and our needs expand, the VA will go back to their leadership, and they tell me they will ask for additional resources, and they'll be prepared to provide that liaison to us on a more frequent basis, based on our need. There are reports that about 60% of veterans have service-connected disabilities or have filed a claim for certification of disability. There are lots of veterans, however, who are eligible for service-connected disabilities and eligible for other VA support and don't know it, don't have the wherewithal to apply for it. The VA liaison will assist these people that might not be aware of what their rights and available benefits are and help them get those benefits applied for and obtained. I'll tell you that my research has demonstrated that community-based organizations have also had a good record of supporting veterans courts in Maricopa County in particular. If we are given the green light to go forward, we will implement a veterans court in October of 2021. We're already working on a DOG grant, and we're looking for other grant opportunities. We've actually begun the grant application process, and we'll continue it later this month. I've heard from Senator Sinema's office. She reached out to me because she was already in contact with Buckeye, who demonstrated an interest. Buckeye is not prepared to go forward with a veterans court. They're certainly not positioned to lead a regional court. So when Senator Sinema's office learned that we were exploring, they contacted me, and they're helping us with our grant application. What we've learned is that the key to Veterans Court is peer support. There are the benefits that veterans get from the VA, but being shoulder to shoulder with other veterans that are similarly burdened with problems has been very helpful in getting people on the right path. What we plan to do is to work cooperatively with the prosecutor's office. We're not going to go this alone. We want the prosecutor's input with respect to a determination of participation in a program. We're not going to take everybody who applies. We're going to ask for input with respect to whether we employ a pre- or post-adjudicative solution with each individual. And we're going to give them, the prosecutor, a commitment that we will require accountability by our participants. This is not a free ride. Just because you serve doesn't mean you get a dismissal. That's not the way this works. With the support of counsel, we could go regional, and we could go regional in the very short term. My plan would be to put together a Glendale City Veterans Court. It will service veterans that have been contacted by law enforcement and charged here in Glendale. But with the consensus of council, I could open this up to the other West Valley cities. My vision would be to first take on the smaller cities that would probably just come in with a couple, literally a couple of veterans a month perhaps. As we grow and as our available resources become more available, then we could perhaps take on the larger cities, Peoria, Surprise. But what is very important is this has to be cost effective. I am confident that in this first year, the upcoming fiscal year, I could do this within budget. I could do it within budget by managing the size of the program. As resources become available, we could talk about expanding the program. Also, to the extent that other cities participate, other cities will have to pay their own way. Every justice court is unique. There are no two that are exactly the same, but the models that I have seen with respect to consolidated courts are models that include each individual city participating and also paying their own way. So we keep close tabs on costs, and we bill each city for the costs they incur. In some models, cities have to send their own prosecutor, send their own court clerk. In some models, the host court provides those services, but to the extent that we provide any services, there's also a bill for services rendered. I think that this is a worthy cause. I think that in the end, it will enhance public safety. I don't think that we're going to see immediate results. That's not the way the program works. That's not the vision. That's not the experience. The experience is that over time, we'll see these faces less frequently. That is the experience. I have not heard of any municipality that has established a Veterans Court terminating the program. I have not heard, and I've asked the specific questions, I've not heard of any Veterans Court that has been unsuccessful to the point that the managers have said, gee, we're sorry we ever got into this. The experience has been, I think, consistently positive. I think that, again, the first goal is enhancement of public safety, but in addition to that, we'll be doing a service to people who earned it and perhaps even deserve it. Subject to your questions, Mayor, Council, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Judge. Questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Judge Piazza. I'm just curious, we talked a little bit about this before, but how about the case management? How, do you have an idea? I mean, I don't know if that's even the right thing to call it, but you know, is it sort of like a diversion type program and that you're going to have to monitor? Is that kind of how you see this working?
I'm not going to call it diversion, but yes, it's a program that requires monitoring. Most of the participants of the program have substance abuse problems, drugs or alcohol or both. In truth, we're probably going to see the people in the program more frequently than we would see the normal defendant, if you will, because we're going to monitor those individuals more closely. A lot of that monitoring is going to be done by service agencies, the VA, and testing is going to be done, and that testing will be reported to case managers. Then it'll be brought back to the judge, and a judge is going to see these individuals as often as necessary to keep them on track, to make sure that if they have problems with complying, that they're brought back on track. If they fail to remain on track and to meet the responsibilities, again, this is not a free ride, they're going to face consequences. Some of these cases might be handled on a pre-adjudication basis. So we would deal with these people before a plea is taken. In some cases, we'll take a plea, and it will be, as you described, a diversion plea. They won't be sentenced, and we'll continue to monitor them, and only if they meet their obligations under the program design for each individual, will they reap the benefit of diversion? So I guess the short answer is a program will be tailored for each individual person, and we will provide the monitoring necessary, primarily through those programs, but ultimately it'll be the responsibility of the judge to keep his or her eye on the results of that person's progress.
So Mayor, if I could just, so basically for the VA would essentially be sort of a pseudo case manager, whoever the liaison is, probably, most likely. And then they would file reports back to the court, to the judge on progress or lack of progress or compliance or whatever other issue there might be.
So the VA is more of a liaison between the court and programs available to the individual veterans. The VA will link each veteran with the resources that are appropriate for that veteran and will provide the services necessary for that veteran. Whoever provides those resources is also going to provide the feedback to the court. So the VA's job really is to be the liaison and the provider of resources. It's going to be individual programs that provide the drug programs, the drug screening, and the initial and ongoing monitoring as well. It's not done by the VA, it's done by folks the VA vector us to.
So Mayor, I have one more question, if I could, that just brought up. So whatever types, I know the court, especially he's sitting behind you, has been really creative in utilizing what you guys have over there. But will it be all paper reports or do we have a way to electronically do this in the court? Is that something that you're looking forward to, or?
Right now, a lot of what we do is still on paper. So is it possible to send those paper reports to us electronically? Yes, but at this point, we're still maintaining paper files in the court, so everything will probably still be reduced to paper.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Clerk?
Thank you, Councilmember.
Mayor, I don't have questions, but I would like to make a couple of comments. Thank you for bringing this issue forward as an item of special interest. We already have a mental health court to service part of our population that is fragile. This is recognition of another part of our population that is also fragile and needs extra help. And so I'm glad that we couldn't have a better person to establish such a court as our new Chief Justice, Nick DiPiazza. We made the best decision possible when we hired Nick to become our new Chief Judge, and I feel very comfortable with his comments regarding the program, his effort to keep the costs down while establishing a new program. So I look forward to the court's opening in October, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Over here.
Thank you, Mayor. Even on page 6, a Veterans Court in and for the West Valley cities is long overdue. I know the mayor has talked about this. We've talked about it with the mayor and wanted this to come forward, and I'm in favor of it, and I'm glad you're bringing it forward, Judge. Thank you.
Councilmember Aldama?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think it's about time that we start a process for our veterans through the judicial system. And Judge, you're just the right guy to do that. And so I'm glad this came up, very supportive of it. And thank you for outlining the fact that just because we start today doesn't mean immediately we're going to start seeing it. It's a process. And thank you for that, because a lot of times we just think, hey, we're going to start tomorrow and we'll see results. It's going to take time. But if we don't start today, we'll never start. So I think it's great, and I'd love to support this.
Great, thank you. And then I'll make a couple statements. It's something I think everybody knows that I've been wanting to have for quite some time with the work that I do with veterans. But there's a lot of things that Judge didn't get a chance to talk about, quite honestly, because there's so many different possibilities with a court. I had the opportunity several years ago to go to Havasu on what that particular court does, and that's their graduation. and they had about 30 or so veterans in there that had gone through the process and literally had a graduation for them, certificates. I think they had a challenge coin they gave them. And they gave each one of those veterans an opportunity to talk about their experience and how the court helped them or didn't help them. And I can tell you there wasn't a dry eye in that room. It was pretty amazing. The thing that I think really amazed me was the support from the council that came to those graduations. Actually came there to be part of that, to show that they were as concerned. It's pretty amazing. I know Havasu's done a marvelous job. Several other places, cities also have these, as you spoke. General Maxim, I met when I was in the legislature, and he's a huge advocate of this, and I know that he's pledged to assist if that was necessary, to advise if you had issues. But there's another part of this that I don't know anybody's even thinking about. A lot of our veterans that get into trouble, that lose their jobs and their families, and next thing you know, they're homeless. If we can solve those problems before they become major problems, take an issue, help them out in the Veterans Court, get them graduated, get them back to work, we're going to start that process of also starting to solve the homeless problem. We're going to start solving some of the problems with theft and break-ins and shoplifting and things like that. There's a lot of other pieces to this that come with it. Not every veteran's going to have drug problems. A lot do, but there's also that have mental issues. There's also a lot that just simply through no fault of their own, maybe things just went south. So I'm very excited. It sounds like we have a consensus, and I will ask formally for a consensus, but it sounds like we have that to get this moving in the right direction. And I can't think of anything that shows more pride within a community than supporting our veterans, and I want to thank everybody for their support. With that, did you have a comment?
No, I just that I support this as well.
We haven't, okay, so I'll ask for a consensus. Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you for bringing this forward, Mayor, and thank you, council members, for your support, and thank you for the kind words. I do appreciate it, and it just encourages me to continue. I'll give this my best. I'll come back to you with a report and also with the IGAs that'll be necessary to sign up the other cities. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Item 2, presentation of the draft Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide and lead today's presentation will be Jim Burke.
Mr. Burke, before you get started, you have several slides up there. I'm going to ask if the council would please hold their questions until you're finished, so you guys can kind of like go through it, and then if you have a question, just make a note of it so we can ask when they're finished, if they would please. Thank you. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, we do have a fairly lengthy presentation. I've got a consultant who's on the Zoom call, Kerry from Greenplay LLC. Kerry's in Colorado, and we'll be doing the lion's share of the presentation. And thank you, Mr. Phelps, for the introduction. What I'd like to do before we turn it over to Kerry to do the presentation is just take a minute to kind of set the stage and talk a little bit about the background of this. So you have a document in front of you that's a very large document, over 250 pages, lots of data, lots of information. Today, of course, is a workshop. We're not asking you to approve that document. We're bringing it forward for discussion and for input from the council, hoping for consensus to move forward to the next phase, which we can talk about. The really important thing I want you to think about is that this is a 10-year master plan. It's a high-level document, and it's making recommendations that we'll be talking to the council about on an annual basis every year going forward. So there'll be lots and lots of opportunities for interaction with the council, the community, talking about priorities. Are they changing? Are they still the right ones? Are these recommendations still on point? And dealing with operating budgets and how they affect this, and the CIP, the capital improvement budgets. The presentation will review some of the history. As I said, it's a very big document. The first 65 pages are material that we've covered before with the council. The findings report, the 1 through 65, and how we did the survey, we'll review all that for you today. But the next section is the implementation plan, 65 to 92. That's really where the rubber meets the road and the specific recommendations are. And they're fairly significant, but they're high level, and a series of plans and exercises will come out after this that'll involve the council and the community. Not the least of which is there's recommendation to do master plans, detailed master plans of 6 specific parks, where we'll hire consultants, go out and do community input, find out exactly what people think about those, and then come back to the park commission and come back to the council for approval of specific plans, detailed plans on each one of those, tied to a detailed capital budget, a schedule, and then an operating budget. That's all to come over the years rolling forward. But the other piece I want to talk about is the disparity report that's a part of this overall master plan. It came up as an item of council interest, just like the last item, quite a few years ago now. I think it was in 17 or 18. And thank you for your patience of waiting for this to get it incorporated into this master plan. It's a lot of data and some very good information. One of the things that comes to mind is if you have a problem but you don't acknowledge the problem, you can't come up with a solution to solve an issue or a problem. And I think now we're really at a place where we can identify an issue, acknowledge it's a challenge for this community, and work together and come up with plans to implement that. I'd like to just highlight some of the details, and Kerry will go into this in more specifics as we do the presentation. But the disparity report, we looked at age, income, and race, and how it affects people's access to public recreation parks facilities here in Glendale. The consultant will tell you that they look at this kind of information fairly often when they do master plans for communities. But looking at it in this specific way and in this detail and analyzing it to the way we did it here in Glendale is probably some groundbreaking work. And they're now incorporating this as a new model for when they're representing or presenting to do plans for other communities. And I think that's pretty exciting that we're on the leading edge of this analysis and this comparison. The recommendations that came out of the disparity report are that we need to address access to outdoor recreation. We need to address access to indoor recreation here in Glendale. We need to address our recreation programming, the free programming, the fee-based programming, the cultural programming, and the special event programming, and how it impacts those 3 areas. And then program locations. Where in town do we do some of the services? And in one of the little details that came out of this that I really like and have talked to a couple of you about is it mentions that not every program has to be in a building. That may be where the staff is, that may be where the budget's assigned, but we can actually take programming and go back out to the parks and do them in different parts of town. And we have tried to do some of that, and we'll talk about that just a little bit. Other things we've learned is that the household incomes in town, between $150,000 down to $50,000, that's the core of our participants. But we're kind of missing out on people who earn, as a household, under $50,000. So it's a great opportunity to target people at a lower income and try to get them engaged with the city, get them involved with our programming and our offerings. We found out that we have a very young community, much younger than I anticipated, and that the bulk of our users are between the ages of 35 and 44. And the teen programming and youth programming is very important to the people who were surveyed and responded to this plan. So that tells us a target area that we probably have not been directly focused on, that we can improve our scoping of recreation programs and access. Environmental programs are important across the board, and sports are really important to the non-white community who's under 54 years of age. Very interesting outcome also. So we'll get into some more details on the disparity report. The draft recommendations that are in front of you, again, I want to just highlight that these are high-level recommendations. We'll be doing annual reviews. We'll be coming back and tying it to budget, operating budgets, to CIP, the capital improvement budgets, and priorities of the council. These conceptual plans, we'll show you some pictures today, but none of the ones we're showing today are the plan. They're all just conceptual ideas of how we might move forward. But the idea is then to have the council direct us to embrace the community, go out and do a master planning process, involve the council, look at the budget and the priorities, and then come back with some specific plans to implement. And then finally, just a reminder, we're seeking consensus to move forward. We'll make whatever changes or address any issues that come up, direction of the council, and then come back to a formal voting meeting and ask you to adopt this plan. And along the way, I would anticipate you'd direct us to take it out and have a review and a recommendation from your Parks and Recreation Commission as another way to touch the community and get direction input. So with those comments, I'd like to turn it over to Kerry. Hi, Kerry.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Director Burke, Mr. Wires, and Council. It's good to see you all. I will share my screen and get my PowerPoint up here. I appreciate you letting me have your attention today to go over, as Director Burke indicated, a lot of information, some of which will be review, but we will let you know where we've been in the past to get to where we are today and how we utilized much of the information to develop this very unique disparity report, which, as Director Burke indicated, is becoming a model, certainly among consultants, as we see how diversity, equity, and inclusion is incredibly important to communities across the United States. And this is a groundbreaking effort, and I really commend Council for including this disparity report in this master plan. And so just as a reminder, the project purpose and the part of the process that we go through in doing this is to assess current conditions and to evaluate community needs and incorporate relevant plans, be that Envision Glendale, or your budget documents, or plans that have been done by the department in the past, and updating those efforts based on the assessments that we've made in this process. So again, we have various stages of this planning process. First, we had information gathering, where we are talking to community members, stakeholders. We are looking at information that the city provides to us, again, whether it be operational materials or budget-related finance information, and looking at different aspects of the community, looking at demographics, and then we pull all that together and we come back and we did our presentation on findings and visioning and begin to think about how all this information will be utilized to move forward so that we can meet community needs. And what's interesting and again special about this is we took a pause between this finding and visionings and where we are today to conduct this disparity report, and to put all that information in through a lens where we asked a question around, are there differences in service levels based on different population groups? And again, asking the question in that manner was what made this effort so different and very relevant and poignant to our master plan here today. So today we're here with draft recommendations, and then as Director Burke indicated, we are hopeful to move you guys into a final plan in the near future so that staff and council can then begin to implement and the community can see the benefits of this effort. And so just a quick reminder that we did that information gathering phase in fall of 2019. And then we came and did our findings presentation in June of 2020. And certainly we appreciated the patience and some time between those occurrences, but certainly with COVID, it was a very unique time to do a planning effort. As I said, this disparity report was provided to City Council in September of 2020 and then presented to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee in October of 2020 and was well received by that committee. In public engagement, we made really good contacts when we were here in person in October 2019. So 103 in-person contacts. We did some really fun Facebook Live public forums, and through that we had 436 online viewers, which is fantastic. Like we were really excited about those numbers. We also did a number of stakeholder interviews, of which you were each a part of those. And then of course we did a very large public forum at the Foothills Recreation and Aquatic Center. And out of those engagement sessions, what we heard is that your community wanted to make sure that there is equity in the delivery of services and to ensure that the quality of those services and of facilities is equitable across your system. Of course, it's important then, your community said, to have the resources to be able to deliver those services and to care for your existing and future facilities. Then making sure that there's this balance between expanding into new facilities and services and maintaining what you already have. Just something that we see typically across communities, that there's this need for that balance. We also heard that there's a desire for personal safety in public spaces and that preserving Glendale's small town agricultural character is really important moving forward. And so I will go through some of the responses that we received from the community survey, of which we had 632 total participants, some of which responded to the random sample survey, and then a number of folks responded through the online survey, which was publicized through a number of different avenues by staff. And in this, again, kind of reiterating what we heard in our in-person engagement sessions was, hey, we want to make sure that we are improving what's currently offered and making sure that we improve those facilities where these, parks and recreation facilities where people can access recreation. A more specific improvement was around restrooms and other park amenities. These were the top two most important ways that people said, I'll go use our parks more if these are improved. Top three future priorities here was improving those park amenities, providing additional walking and biking paths, and increasing and providing events and festivals. And we still hear that even through COVID, we still saw across work that we have done across the country that this notion around special events and festivals is still important to people. And so again, some of the key findings from the community survey was balancing that, prioritizing new improvements with improvements to existing facilities and parks. People in the open comments were very positive about Glendale's parks and recreation services and facilities, and that was a great thing to hear, of course. Then also three different areas where we saw that these facilities are very important to people and that they are meeting the needs is around Thunderbird Conservation Park, your community and neighborhood parks, and the Foothills Recreation and Aquatics Center. So, of course, through all our work, it's not just our community needs that we're paying attention to, but we also do a number of different sorts of analyses. And one of the steps that we were asked to look at was around benchmarking Glendale to neighboring agencies. And so in doing this, I'll just cover a couple of things that we looked at, but here on the operating expenditures per park acre, where we saw, and I presented this to you before, but I'll remind you that we see here, Glendale is kind of on that lower end of operating expenditures per park acre. So it's important to realize that that is per park acre. And really, the city of Glendale does have a lot of parks, a lot of neighborhood parks that maybe we would not see in other communities. They might tend to have a few more community parks. But here, that I think impacts this number certainly in terms of park acres. And on FTEs per 10,000 residents, what we see here is that Glendale is below many of its neighbors and below that NRPA median, but we should be mindful that some of this comes about because of the utilization of contracted services in Glendale. And two, I think it's important to note that these NRPA comparisons are based on self-reported data. And so it's hard for us to know exactly whether or not one agency or another is reporting contracted services or not. And so I think here, Glendale had not submitted their FTE numbers that included contracted services. So I think that's why we see this discrepancy a bit here. In terms of our going out and visiting all your park sites and facilities, we had 2 staff members who came out and did that the fall of 2019. And what they saw is that things are generally well maintained, but certainly there is some deferred maintenance that was visible from what they could see. And that you do have some very unique properties in combination with your community parks and your neighborhood parks. But that you have some opportunities for improvements in those areas. There's an opportunity to continue to brand city parks so that they are recognizable facilities that the city is taking care of and responsible for. Some of the signs that I have seen myself are fairly faded, and so there's opportunity to address some of those things, but that's a small action that can be taken at some point in the future. We also noticed that some of your playground surfacing is worn and that court surfaces are worn and dated. And some of the racquetball facilities are worn and dated as well. So those are just general observations that our GIS and level of service staff observed when they were out in the field. So another part that we do as part of our analysis is looking at what we call GRASP, neighborhood access. And this is not just looking at a park and how many people have access to a park. It actually looks at the condition of parks, which is what makes this type of analysis different from what other level of service analyses get into. And so with this, what you see in this map, and again, I've shared this with you before, but I'll just remind you that the darker orange pieces of this map is where you have kind of a higher access to quality components that are making up your park. So it's not just access to a park, it's access to quality components at a park site. And so we see good coverage overall in here, and certainly some darker orange throughout the system, and certainly some opportunity to make some enhancements across the board, but I will get into that a little bit later. So I want to talk about the Disparity Report, as Director Burke mentioned. This was a very, I want to say motivating for me. I found looking at access to recreation and to parks through this lens a very valuable exercise. In fact, just earlier today, I presented this disparity report and the methodology behind it to my coworkers with Green Play, and we have an interview coming up in a newsletter that will go out to about 5,000 email respondents in our database, not this Friday, but next Friday, that explains this methodology and really highlights it because we think that this is a point of pride, and I hope that Glendale thinks so too. So again, the question that we were asking is there a difference in access to services? And this is again based on race, age, and household income. And we looked at access to indoor recreation, outdoor recreation facilities, to programs, as in what programs are being provided, to whom are they being provided, as well as where are these programs that are being offered, where are they located? And so I'll go over just a couple of slides here to help you understand how we utilize this information and ask this question. So here in the access to outdoor recreation facilities, we look at this map, and this is from a walkability frame of mind, and this is part of our level of service analysis that we perform. And so we're looking at 10-minute walks to different parks. And what you can see here is that the purple means that people have access at or above kind of the typical Glendale park. So this is not us comparing Glendale to anybody else. This is us just looking at Glendale compared to itself, to its own parks and facilities. And what we see is that the yellow means that people who live in those areas are below that kind of target standard that you see in Glendale. And the gray spaces mean that there is no service. And a lot of this, because this is from a walkability frame, is because we might have roads that impede somebody's ability to walk. And so some of our recommendations that you'll see actually translate into the world of transportation. And we see this a lot in the work that we do. And knowing that Parks and Recreation does not necessarily take care of roads, that is something that's outside their purview, but certainly this information could be helpful to transportation and towards city efforts when you think about walkability. Because when we ask the question, is there a difference? The answer is yes, that there is a difference in access. And while we certainly don't expect a community to be fully purple. What we do expect is that where we have gap areas, which are the yellow and the gray areas, that we, in the future, going forward, that the city look at those areas and make determinations as to whether or not does a new park need to be constructed, or is it a walkability improvements. So does there need to be a crosswalk or a crossing, at grade crossing? We don't know what that is specifically, but there are opportunities to be mined here. And you can see over on the west side of town where there's a lot of gray, but that is an industrial part of town. And so it doesn't make sense to provide park services over there. And so these are the kinds of things that need to be taken into consideration as this information is used going forward. Another point that I had mentioned that we looked at was access to indoor recreation facilities. And again, asking the question, is there a difference in access to services? The answer was yes, there is a difference. And so when we look at where we can make improvements, and you'll see this specifically in goal number 1, specifically objective 1.2, is around how do you get people to places? So maybe it's a partnership to provide transportation to some of these recreation facilities. For example, to Thunderbird Conservation Park. And all this is on my next slide, but it is infrequently visited by people whose household income is less than $50,000 and who are non-white. And so maybe there's an opportunity to partner on a transportation effort to get people who typically don't visit Thunderbird Conservation Park to get up that way and to participate in some environmental education programs or other opportunities, or just to hike. So another opportunity for an improvement is the build out of Heroes Regional Park and providing a recreation facility there. And then of course you have these excellent facilities that already exist at Rose Lane, Glendale Community Center, and O'Neill Park. And I know that there are efforts currently underway to make improvements, and I'm so happy to hear that the city has embraced this and is going to be making some changes there, because you have an incredible opportunity to outreach to youth in these areas. And that's what we saw, is that there is this opportunity to provide after-school programming and summer camps in these locations. So I think this is great work that the City Council is already supporting from this plan. So again, with current use disparities, what we saw was households with income under 50,000 and over 150, they do participate less in programs, and they use facilities less frequently. So how do we market to those folks and let them know that we do have programs for them? So there's opportunity for creating programs that appeal to different population groups, as well as marketing efforts so that people know that they have these opportunities in Glendale. Another point that we want to share around current use is that folks between the ages of 35 and 44 said that they do use programs and recreation facilities more than any other groups. However, there's a caveat here, because this age group, their use is just above infrequently used. So it wasn't overwhelming that they use it all the time. It's that they infrequently use it, but they do use it more than others. So I think what that says to me is that you have, again, an opportunity to appeal to the community in a way that maybe you haven't before in Parks and Recreation, and that marketing and getting the word out about your programs and services is really important. So this is a communication opportunity as well as program development opportunity. At historic Saguaro Ranch Park, This one is often visited by respondents whose household income is less than $100,000. And so this to me says, hey, this is in a nice location. A lot of people are getting out and they know about it and they are using it, which is a positive sign. That's great that they're out there using the facilities that are associated with that park. And then I mentioned Thunderbird Conservation Park already. And so out of that disparity report, there are quite a few recommendations. So I'm just sharing some of the high level recommendations right now. But what we said is you do have an opportunity to overall to improve residents' access to quality parks and recreation in Glendale. And that is across Glendale. So utilizing the information that you have at hand is to make park improvements in some of those gap areas. And that could be anything from making component improvements, so maybe replacing infrastructure pieces, playgrounds, or I know at O'Neill, you've just added a splash pad, which is awesome. That's a great move. But you also have opportunities to improve those centers, which I mentioned there's already an effort underway, I believe, so that's encouraging. Making sure that you have programs that appeal to younger adults and to families as well as youth. And then making sure, as Director Burke said, that when programming staff is looking at where they're going to offer their programs, that it is done at a variety of locations across your system. You have so many parks that could be utilized for holding programs, especially coming out of COVID. We're seeing opportunities and new ways of thinking about how you can deliver programs in outdoor spaces. So that's very exciting. So now I'll go through the master plan recommendations. And again, I want to point out that this goal number 1 is really tied to the disparity report findings. And pretty much nearly everything that you see in goal number 1 supports the disparity report findings. And so what we're suggesting here is, again, just making sure that there is access to parks and recreation experiences overall. And so we need to look at making sure that when you do these improvements that are being funded, that you make sure that public involvement is top of mind in these planning efforts, that these planning efforts should not be done amongst staff, but rather making sure that the public is involved and that their needs are being met as we create new improvements at parks. And I've put in specific strategies for how you can generate involvement from the public. I mean, it's not an easy thing, but there are things that can be done in relationships that can be developed that can help create trust between the city and different community groups, population groups, and that work needs to be done by staff. Collaborating to make connections. So again, this is where we talk about sharing some of this information with transportation so that as improvements to streets and roads and sidewalks are made, that you're thinking about making connections to key destinations in the city. And many of those are parks and recreation facilities. And then providing those indoor recreation facilities, which I've touched on a number of times, both at Glendale Heroes Regional Park with a future facility there, as well as improvements to the 3 existing facilities. And then offering fee-based programs that appeal to the community. So not just focusing on a certain population group, but making sure that we have programs that are appealing to families, to young people, to older adults, pretty much to everyone. You have a nice, diverse population there in Glendale, but certainly this idea around young families is very real. So it is important to point out that these park improvement concepts that are included in this plan are conceptual only. They are simply designed based on what we heard during this process, but as you go out to make specific park improvements, that public engagement process that I just mentioned is what will actually shape the final outcome of any improvements that are made at any of these sites. So we have conceptual layouts for Saguaro Ranch Park and Thunderbird Conservation Park. There's a number of different improvement ideas that have been shared in this plan for TCP. And then, of course, Glendale Heroes Regional Park, which is, again, an exciting opportunity down the road to expand access to recreation. So I will really quickly touch here on implementing financial strategies aimed at increasing participation. And the reason why is because you have the Glendale Youth Scholarship Fund, and I think that there's opportunity to utilize that more. And so there are some strategies underneath this goal 1 so that you can continue to expand and provide services in low-income neighborhoods and get more kids participating in these communities at these centers and in programs. Goal number 2 is around resource allocation and asset management. And so there's a number of best practices for operations and maintenance that we have in here. That includes utilization of asset management system. And we know that the city has a system that is currently in use, but that the department is working towards progressing the use of that system itself. And so we encourage that, absolutely, because that can help inform future budgets and help you manage staff and see where your kind of problem areas are and help reduce the number of Glendale 1 reports going down the road. And then making sure that you're conducting regular assessments that inform your needs. One thing that is could be beneficial down the road is an animal management plan at Soro Ranch Park. That certainly is something that could be considered. It's not necessarily a top priority, but it is something that would be beneficial to that park site. Staffing certainly is something to make sure that the system is well maintained, and we know that there's a history there, through a number of different financial downturns that we've, Glendale has experienced and been impacted by, but making sure that, and this is something we heard from the community, is making sure that the park system and programs are adequately funded. Goal number 3 is around solutions and relationships. So again, this is where some of those recommendations around public engagement and making sure that you are having what I call meaningful public process when you're planning. And this can be a challenge, but it is well worth the work, and making sure that you have people and staff who are cultivating relationships with different population groups so that when you do go out to do a planning effort, you have people who want to be a part of those processes and want to have their voices heard. In terms of maximizing your resources, we have a recommendation in this plan for conducting a process, what we call resource allocation, or also known as cost recovery, which is making sure that your fees are where they should be and making sure that you're subsidizing the things that are community priorities. So we recommend that the department eventually go through that process. And again, just conducting regular assessments as needed. And then goal number 4 is around your knowledgeable workforce. And that is just making sure that communications are clear in the department and that you are cultivating and creating this positive workplace culture. We have a number of strategies in there for how to improve communications and how to make sure that your staff are engaged and, kind of being the cheerleaders of your system and making sure that they love their jobs and are happy. And that speaks to employee engagement as well. And so with hopefully you see that these 4 goals too are aligned with your balanced scorecard methodology that you guys utilize there in Glendale. And so with that, I would love to entertain any questions. And as Director Burke said, we are hopeful to move from today to clarify any issues and deal with anything we need to on our end, and then get you guys a final plan for adoption.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Turner. Yeah, hold on. Can you hear him?
No, sir. Mr. Mayor, I cannot.
Go ahead and push the button one more time.
Was pushed. All right. That sounds better.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff, and our consultant for the presentation. As was mentioned, it is a hefty document. I think you said 250 pages, and I've got just about that many yellow sticky notes, but fortunately for all of you here, I had a chance to meet with Mr. Burke and Ms. Rios ahead of time and go through most of those. The few things I want to bring up to start with are, well, for one, to thank Councilmember Aldama for having introduced the idea of creating a disparity report that seems to be not something just missing in Glendale, but that's been missing nationally and is going to make a difference in other communities and hopefully as well as ours. A few highlights that I wanted to address is, one is the staffing situation. We do have the slide that shows us with the low number of full-time equivalent employees as compared to other cities here in the valley and the national average. There seems to be uncertainty as to exactly if that number is accurate, and I would like to have staff between now and adoption dive into that so that we know whether or not it's just a reporting error or whether or not we actually do have that big of a disparity, so that the final report that we adopt is accurate, because I think that's important to have. Again, still on staffing, it's been mentioned that we would benefit by having an arborist, perhaps. I think seriously that we would benefit by regaining the historic preservationist that we used to have on our park staff that was particularly good at interpreting and protecting the historic area, Saguaro Ranch Park, but could be just as useful at Manistee Ranch or in downtown Glendale. It may be a liaison as well between parks and planning, but I think we're suffering because we don't have anybody on staff that is well-versed in our history and is attached to it in the sense that they're very protective of it. Another one, and the other would be the arborist, or we used to have a landscape architect on staff here with the city years ago, and I think that would be helpful perhaps not only to parks but also to right-of-way and other departments, so maybe it can be collaborative. I was glad to see special events and festivals mentioned as a way to increase participation. I think that additional type activities, I know we have, and they may be put on by us with other collaborations like our Folk and Heritage Festival at Soro Ranch Park is, or that they may be more almost done entirely by outside groups like the Tractor Antique Gas Engine and Tractor Show is. Those kinds of things appeal to a range of our customer base, our residents that may not be reached, and having more of those unique type activities, not all of them agricultural oriented or even history oriented, but that's how we can appeal to others, bring them into our system so they become more aware of what all we offer. I'm basically, part of what I'm saying is it's not about growing everything we do huge. It's about right-sizing the things we do and providing a lot of variety and using that as an opportunity to let people know what else is available to them. The one concern, I guess, that I would say that I have is on page 81 of the book. It's also in the slide deck, and that's the conceptual proposal for Saguaro Ranch Park. It's one of 3 parks in which a conceptual proposal was included. I know during the presentation it was said that it's important to have the public outreach and input from the public and all of this, and I'm concerned that that document, though it may have a few good ideas, really has not been vetted publicly, and there's things in there that I'm not sure are great ideas or in great locations, and I'm concerned that having it in there as a drawing, a mapped out, here's what you could do with the park concept, gives it too much inertia, and it needs to not have that. People are going to see that in the master plan and think that if the master plan's adopted, that's adopted, and it isn't. And I think we could produce something more appropriate. So I would like to see that we not include that drawing, but instead, perhaps we could include photographs of some of those concepts, you know, from around the country. Of course, you're not expected to go visit. You can find those photographs online and drop the photograph. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Burke, you're not increasing your travel budget. But pick some photographs, a broad selection of photographs that might be things that we would want to include, but don't anchor them into the document in such a way that it feels like they've been adopted in specific locations in an existing park. I think we're going to get, again, the inertia and then the friction that comes from it won't serve us well. I'd like to see differently. That's all for the moment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple things. I wanted to touch again on staff because I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the low number of staff per resident, but the high cost of staff. On page 30, it speaks to $287,360 per FTE. On a national level, the annual full-time equivalent employee is about 93,000. So I don't know whether that can be attributed to outsourcing or that's one question. And then another question I had was the 1.91, does that address current positions that are in the budget but vacant? So just if I could, and I'll stop there for now.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the 1.91, I believe, is low because of the contracted services that the city does employ. We don't see quite that much typically being certain, kind of sent out of house. But I would say that what the trade-off is there, and I notice this, is that you don't have the same capital outlay then related with having all the equipment in-house. And so there's, pros and cons to everything. But I think in fact, I know, I was aware that there's concern around the 1.91 and did some background research. And indeed, it is attributed to the contracted services that the city employs. And at this time, this was looking at fiscal year 19 information. And so any vacancies that were around then, I actually would need to lean on Director Burke to see what, if there were any vacancies at that time. We were provided, this is information that was provided through NRPA, and so I can't see all the raw data. I can simply see what the outcomes of all that information is. So I would have to ask staff if there was any insight as to whether there were any vacancies at that time.
Mayor, members of the council, there's always vacancies, but I'm sure that number, and we'll delve into it and come back to you, but I would believe it would be to budgeted staff in the budget document, not necessarily the number of filled staff. So it was total FTEs approved at the time. The second question that Councilmember Tomachoff asked about, we'll have to do some looking into to see why the other number is higher than the one on page 30, also the employee ratio. I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's because, for the same reason, just a different analysis, is the amount of contracting we do. We have fewer FTEs, so the total budget divided into FTEs is higher than we expected. Why it's so much higher is I don't know off the top of my head.
If I could continue. So, yeah, I mean, it's a little puzzling to try to get an understanding because the revenue and expenditure, being that the park operating expenditures per acre also are, I mean, I think it's not a surprise to any of us up here, that we're well below, we're less than half of the next in line, I guess, for a city of a comparable size. But it's just surprising that I guess, is there a way to know which way is more efficient, which way is more effective? Do you get better buy-in when you have your staff on city employees, where they're more committed to the parks rather than just a grounds crew that comes through? I'm just wondering, is there a way to measure the efficiency of doing it the way we're doing it, which obviously brings the cost per employee up, but we're really not getting the results we want. Obviously, we need to spend more money, but is there a study in efficiency on which way works better, whether you have more parks workers on staff or you outsource a lot of that type of work?
Mayor, members of the council, I think it's a challenging analysis, and you have to weigh what your priorities are. And when we did the outsourcing, a lot of it happened quite a few years back. We did fairly minimum scope. So we're not getting the high level of service you might be expecting from your outsourcing. And when you have internal staff doing it, your own FTEs, those employees work for you as a group, and you can control and you can modify and you can direct differently. But it comes with a different expense ratio. You have the overhead, you have the other costs that go with it. So it's a trade-off of back and forth. I think part of the issue on performance here in Glendale is we did some outsourcing, but we didn't focus on and have staff inside to monitor those contracts. We didn't have people tracking them, people who are really experts in that particular discipline, who then could take the scope of work and then verify in the field that the work is getting done in a timely way. Typically in outsourcing contracting, you get a low cost in the initial bid, then it creeps over time. So I think these costs cross each other over a long period of time, but in the short term, there's usually a benefit for trying to outsource and using the contract because you don't have the overhead costs for the employee. We can continue to evaluate that as we go forward.
Mayor, if I could continue, I've got a few more. I know one of the big things, I think, is increasing the level of maintenance. I know current budget restrictions our level of maintenance of, pruning, mowing, all of that, and watering too. And I know, I actually just looked it up. We had that intelligent irrigation systems. I don't know if that's actually panned out for us. I do see that the contract was extended and expires again this coming November, but obviously watering is huge. I know, in some parts of the city, we've got, effluent water to use, which really keeps the cost down. Where you have to use potable water, it's way more expensive to put water on grass and plants. So, but I'm just curious I didn't see that mentioned here, but obviously improving the amenities in the parks, updating equipment, all of that, but increasing the level of maintenance, I would think has got to be huge.
Mayor, members of council, Councilman Thomas, I believe it is one of the recommendations to look at and get back to maintenance standards. I believe the way we're maintaining now is really maintaining to what the budget allows us to do. In the past, we had some modes of maintenance. We had standards for one class of park. The downtown parks, the sport complexes got a level of maintenance, maybe the platinum maintenance. The community parks maybe got the gold standard. The neighborhood parks got a little bit less, and then detention basins and other properties got the lowest level of maintenance. We have moved away from all of that, and I think we're allowing ourselves to maintain where we're budgeted, which is pretty much that lower tier all across the board. So to make that change, we'll have to do it over time as we increase in council's consideration of additional FTEs or additional contract money or additional budget. But I believe it is one of the recommendations that Kerry touched on, and it's a key one, is looking at that modes of maintenance.
So, Mayor, I think essentially, if I understand it right now, basic maintenance is a park's touched every 2 weeks. Is that what our level of service is right now?
No, I think it's a little more frequent than that. During the season, we're mowing it once a week, and we're picking up trash with our contractor twice a week. And then our staff are touching the properties once, maybe twice a week, depending on the park. The bigger parks getting more frequent touches than the smaller parks. But we don't have dedicated staff at very many of our properties, and we're not able to touch every park every single day and maintain a very high level standard, picking up loose trash, verifying there might be a broken bench or an irrigation repair. We catch a lot of those from comments from other people, observations that either hit one of your offices or come through Glendale 1 or come from a user that stops one of our staff and said, have you seen that problem over there? And then having the resources to actually deal with those problems. Sometimes it takes a period of time to really get that into the workflow and get it taken care of because of the way we're staffed.
Okay, just a couple more, Mayor, if I could. let's see, I wrote down revenue recovery philosophy, and I think we're at some point going to have a discussion about that, because I know when FRAC was first opened and when I was first elected, I believe there was a internal policy on revenue recovery for, and I know there's been some discussions about, say, $500,000 for temporary part-time staff staffing at FRAC. It might not have been quite that amount of money, but I know, generally speaking, historically, the revenue recovery at FRAC, because of the participation in the programs, and I think the targeting programs that the community's going to want to participate in and doesn't mind paying for, recovered, anywhere from 70 to 80% of the cost of putting on the programs. So, but we're going to, I think, have to have a discussion about that, and as part of the disparity issue is, what is our philosophy about trying to recover the investment in programs? Because I know that we've tried programs in other parts of the city where we don't get participation, and so we're going to have that discussion about what's our commitment to continuing to try to offer programs when, you have to have a certain threshold of people to even make it worthwhile for the instructor to show up and teach a yoga class, for example, or whatever the class is. You've got to, how do we get people to, besides the youth scholarships, a lot of the programs are adult programs, and I think probably revenue generated even probably more on adult, exercise, yoga, general, gym memberships, that sort of thing, to get people to actually want to participate. And how do we make it affordable? And is our philosophy we don't care about revenue recovery anymore, or do we still? Those are conversations, I think, as we get to finalizing this, is I think that our policy about revenue recovery is we're going to have that conversation. I don't know, we've never had it since I've been here, and I know this year, all bets have been off. The facilities have been closed. There's literally going to be no recovery. But the facility still had to be maintained, air conditioned, all of that, even though there was nothing happening there. I know we furloughed all of the temporary staff, so that saved some money, but the cost of the facility stays, whether it's being used or not. So that's a conversation I think we need to have. And then one last thing, Mayor, if I could, I'd like to second, maybe I feel a little bit differently about it than Councilmember Turner, but as far as the renderings and I guess, suggestions on Thunderbird Conservation Park. If when we're going to be having the public weigh in, I'd like for them to be able to look at those pictures and know that those are suggestions or samples or something, that they don't think, okay, well, we're going to try to duplicate that it's a little more of a, presented as more of an idea or maybe something to work from than that this is what we're trying to duplicate. So I don't know if there's a way to, like when you get proofs from a photographer, if they're marked proof, so you can't download them yourself and use them, so that somehow we identify that it's basically just a concept. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Melner?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to recognize Mr. Burke and his staff for all the work and effort they put into bringing this plan forward, as well as the consultant. I know when I looked through that, the booklet that was prepared, as the words I told Mr. Burke, it gave me a headache just going through all the detail, because there's a lot there, and I appreciate all the efforts that has been put in to make that happen. It's going to really make a difference in our park system. And I just wanted to address a couple of the concerns that have already been brought up, and again, having to do with the FTEs. And I agree with what has been stated. I think the consultant stated it. We need to change those numbers so they reflect accurately our outside services. Whether we add in full FTEs, as an example of if we have 10 agencies that are out there doing maintenance for us, what do other cities do and how many FTEs do they have to equate that? Either add them back in or go to the other cities and take out the FTEs, because we can't compare apples and oranges here. We cannot rely on that number, in my opinion. That number needs to be adjusted so that it is apples to apples in all cases. And I'd also like the same thing addressed in the expenditure per park acre. I mean, yes, we are much lower, but are we much more efficient because we use outside agencies? Is our cost per mowing an acre of grass much less than, say, Scottsdale, who may use internal employees to do that? And I think we need to know that answer to accurately know whether or not our budget really is as low below the other cities as it currently is. As far as the concepts brought up by Councilmember Turner and Tomachoff, more is better in my opinion. I think it gives us more ideas as a council as we start deciding how we want to do these projects, giving us all the ideas that are out there and being used in the communities. Maybe pictures of other parks. Doesn't have to be necessarily a rendering of an existing park in our city, but I think more is much better, so it helps us kind of be more creative, and it helps the public also understand what can be in our parks. Regarding disparity, that was mentioned, I think, this council has taken action, and by the suggestion of Councilmember Aldama, we are now opening 3 community centers. I think, and again, we did that as when we discussed it, we're going to see how this works, and we hope we get community involvement. We hope it makes a difference in the community. I think once we do that, and that's already in progress, we will have some data. We'll have some experience. We'll know what we can expect from programs, whether we do them in the park or in the community center, and we'll be able to better understand how we should invest our money. And so I think we need to really pay attention to how those programs are going to be working and reflect those back to our park master plan as well. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Art.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with most of Councilmember Malnar's remarks. I think he's spot on with regard to the statistical information regarding park employees and cost per park. Something is skewed there somewhere, so I appreciate your comments with regard to that. I also want to say that the Disparity Report, I'm glad that Kerry and crew liked it, because I think it's been long overdue in Glendale for many years. Every year when the Recreation magazine came out, I would go through it and I would statistically see how many programs were offered at FRAC and how many were offered other places in Glendale. And guess what? 99% of the programs were at FRAC. And very little, if anything, was offered in the rest of town. So I think this Disparity Report is critical to bringing in those low socioeconomic groups that we've not paid attention to and not touched for many years. They deserve the same access and benefits of our recreation programs as our more affluent neighbors do. There were a couple of comments that I wanted to make with regard to the report itself. The census data is stale. It's 10 years old. We just redid the census. And I think that it is critical that updated census material be used and reflected in this report. For instance, 10 years ago, the populations of all 6 districts was somewhere in the neighborhood of between 35 and 40,000, because your goal is to make the districts as equitable as possible in terms of population. However, in those 10 years, the residents, the population in the Yucca district have doubled. And I suspect, as a result of the survey, we're going to see a population in the Yucca district of somewhere around 70 to 75,000 people. It's inevitable with all of the apartment units that have gone in, the new subdivisions, just recently, that the growth that has occurred in the Yucca district is tremendous. And I think the census data has to reflect that the needs may be greater than are currently apparent within the report for the western part of Glendale. And I'm not talking about the 303 area. That's understood. That's an industrial commercial corridor. But Westgate, Sun Harrow, we even have new apartment complexes coming in on the west side of the Loop 101. These people are entitled to the same level of recreational opportunity as the rest of the city. And that has not been the case for a very long time, which brings me to Heroes Park, which is going on 22 years of non-completion. And I note within the report that it's suggested that the planning occur 7 years within a 7-year time span or longer, which will make Heroes Park a park still uncompleted 30 years after its inception. That is unacceptable, not just to me, but to every resident that lives on the west side of town. FRAC is the gold standard for this city. You want to go to a program, you go to FRAC. You want to go to a gym, you go to FRAC. You want to go swim, you go to FRAC. Those things are not available commonly in the rest of the city. And it's about time we did complete these kinds of facilities at Heroes to give people in central and western Glendale an opportunity to enjoy the same kind of benefits in terms of recreational opportunities. It's long overdue. Lastly, I have a question, curious question. I wonder if it's possible to set up a special fund, a dedicated, allocated fund, strictly for parks that could be earmarked for specific parks, so that if a community group wanted to do a fundraiser and dedicate part of that money to a park in their area, it could be done. Or if we could get some of the sports teams in town to dedicate funding for specific parks or specific recreational opportunities within parks, we would have that ability to have a fund already created so that we could say to them, here's where you put the money, earmark it for whatever park or activity you wish. But at least can we create some kind of mechanism that's available to the entire community so that if they wish to contribute, we do have a kind of mini program with, I think it's benches. But it's so convoluted and complicated for a citizen to dedicate a bench to maybe a deceased family member or just with the family name on it, that it's ridiculous. So I think we need to create funding opportunities within our own community that can contribute to our park system. And it's quite all right if they want to dedicate money to a particular park or a particular activity. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to have Councilmember Aldama go next. He's been holding for 45 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. So thank you, Kerry. Appreciate all your work, you and your team, and thank you to our staff, Vicki, Jim, and everybody else that had to do with the master plan and the Disparity Report. I've served for 6 years and hopefully for many more years if allowed to, but this is one of the highlights of my service is the city coming together, this leadership group right here, and asking for a Disparity Report and allowing it to go through the process, and then we now have the results. It is absolutely incredible, and it's not an aha moment. It isn't from this council member, aha, we got you, that's what we want. It's just an opportunity to share with you and convey to you the facts, the data that was dug up by the consultant. That's all it is. It's what we've been trying to convey. It's what council members before me have been trying to convey. It's what the community's been trying to convey. Hey, we have an issue, and we just need to look at it. Get a plan together and start to road map it and start to resolve those issues. And so I feel comfortable that that's what we're going to do. We now know where the disparities are and what we learned. And I heard from staff when I met with them here's what I heard from them. We learned a lot. We absolutely did. We learned that not only in the Ocotillo district do we have disparities, but we have them all across the city, even over near foothills. And I'll speak to that in a minute, but we even have gray areas and light orange. For those of you who don't know the colors, is gray is where there's no access, and the orange is not enough service. It's across the city. It's everywhere. My disparity report request was based from the Ocotillo district, but we learned that it's everywhere. Councilmember Malinar mentioned earlier that, you know what, pat this city on the back, because we've already started looking at some of those disparities, like O'Neill Park. We now have a splash pad, which I'm scheduled to go look at on Monday. The Glendale Community Centers are now in the hands of city staff, and they are undergoing renovations. We already started. We're not waiting for the plan to get implemented. We already started. There's a whole slew of things I can talk about. Pickleball courts at Ocotillo, over at Bonzo Park. So we've already started that. So I am very, very proud of this city and this leadership to get this report going and get the findings. It was mentioned about a fee base for programs. Let me just read something, because I'm not going to pull this out of my hat. This is the results from the Disparity Report that will address fee-based programs in Glendale. I didn't make this up, folks. It's part of the analysis, and this is how we're going to look at things, how we're going to fix it. Let me just read this real quick. Analysis of the number of fee-based programs shows that from April, this is just from 18 to 19, Foothills Recreation and Aquatic Center, FRAC, hosted a majority of programs. Given this facility's variety of program spaces, this emphasis on use is not surprising. At Foothills Recreational Aquatic Center, 69% of fee-based programs were out of that facility. Now, let me continue. So the question is there a difference in service levels? The answer is yes. Recreational program information shows that the largest opportunity for accessing indoor facilities and fee-based and drop-in programs is at Foothills Recreation and Aquatic Center. Access to this facility is likely different for those who have more disposable income. An example, individuals with higher household incomes than for those with less. An example, individuals with lower household incomes. Also, access to indoor facility level service analysis showed that physical access at Foothills Recreational and Aquatic Center is challenged for residents living further away from the facility than those living in closer proximities. Now, going to the fee base, you can't have a one-glove-fits-all fee. It just ain't going to happen. You can't have a Foothills Recreational Center and have one fee, one standard structured fee that fits everybody. It's just not going to work. What the recommendation was, however, from the consultant was consider a sliding scale membership fee program to Foothills Recreation Aquatic Center for residents living below the poverty level. They did their work, folks. They did it for us. We don't have to create that. If there's families that Foothills is serving and they can't afford it, create a sliding schedule. That's all. Kids lack access to our programs and parks at Glendale, not because of the color of their skin, because that's been said, not because of the color of their skin, but because of the level of their income, their parents' income. That's why they don't have access. If you live here in the Ocotillo district, you sure in the heck can't get over to Foothills. Foothills is a great place. I want to continue putting money into Foothills. I want to preserve it, and I want to make it better. But the fee base is a hindrance to children on the far west, the west side of Glendale, the east side, south, and central. We just don't have the access. So I'm going to sit back and let staff drive this, because the Disparity Report told us everything we needed to know. We now know what we knew, and we just didn't know how to convey it. I spent 6 years on this council. Councilmember Tomachoff and I sparred quite a bit of times about her opinion on Foothills and my opinion on it. I think we agree that it's a great facility, and it serves Glendale, and it's going to continue to serve Glendale for many years. We have some issues. Let's let the Disparity Report solve the issue with our staff. We have professionals in the room. We're going to put a plan together, and I'm going to sit back and watch our disparity report go to work, and this city's already started its improvements, and I'm really happy with it. But there's some things we need to fix, but it certainly isn't an aha moment from me. It's just to say, good, we now have a roadmap, and so I look forward to seeing the outcomes and results from this report, and good work, staff. Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm going to make a more than obvious statement. All of this, all of us know can be fixed, and it just simply takes money. It just takes money, and we have to, as a council, make that determination. What are our priorities? You know, is it parks? Is it a new center? Is it new soccer fields? That's really what it comes down to, is the amount of money we have coming in, the amount of money that we're going to spend going out, and where we're going to get it from. And I hope everybody keeps that in mind. I would love to have the best park systems in the United States, and we can do that if we're willing to spend the money, but where are we going to give up on something else? So I know you wanted to speak, but I think we're all in the right direction. I'm encouraged by the report that was given. I think it gives us a little bit better, clearer view of what we need to accomplish. But before this report ever started, the one thing that I knew already is we can solve a lot of these problems if we just got more money. And the council's going to have to make that decision, we're going to fund or not. So.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure you probably all know what I want to talk about. FRAC I didn't build FRAC, by the way, single-handedly. I didn't build it. I didn't decide to build it. In fact, I think when it was planned, wasn't even a Glendale resident. And we have built a park in other parts of the city for Major League Baseball. We've invested more money in the Yucca District. Hindsight's always 20/20, I understand that, but we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars invested in other things rather than things that are priorities for our residents. We're dealing with that now. We have a lake already in the Yucca District, inside a park that the residents can't even use. So I feel like that this council has done a lot of good work for residents. I was very encouraging for Councilmember Aldama. Now, I did not support the idea of putting a pool back at the park, because the reason the pool was shut down is because we had the data to show nobody was using it. But a splash pad we were absolutely supportive of. We, by the way, do have a place to swim in another part of the city called Rose Lane. We just spent $500,000 at Rose Lane for the kids to swim there. We have, as a council, I'm not taking credit myself, as a council have made decisions in the best interest with what we have to work with right now, the funding we have right now. But don't go throwing, if you live in a glass house, don't go start throwing stones. We have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in other parts of the city that probably were not in the best interest, at least for recreational interests for our residents. They were, playgrounds for billionaires. So we have, like I said, we have consistently made decisions that are in the best interest of spending money on Paseo, and we've delivered on things that what we have been able to do over the last several years here. So I absolutely support finishing Heroes Park. I even encouraged or suggested that the residents be resurveyed to find out, do they want the lake now, or would they rather start on the community center, so that there is, what other facility is there to hold these indoor recreation facilities in? There isn't one. That hasn't been a priority yet. The priorities have been determined, and that's fine. But and until we have other places to hold these, and we make that a priority where we direct the funding, it's not going to happen. So the conversation is not that difficult to understand. It's just to look in the mirror, all of us, and say, are we making decisions in the best interest of Glendale residents, not just the residents of my district? And if you look at slide 16, you can see, I believe that the Cholla District has fewer parks than any other part of the city. City parks anyway, no HOAs, but I pay my HOA, we pay for those. We pay our taxes and we pay for the parks. So residents in my district aren't complaining. In fact, some of the districts' HOAs are actually doing park maintenance. I have one that's been, Mr. Burke knows, has been incredibly successful. We tried it on a one-year basis. They're literally maintaining their own park. Because they want a higher level of maintenance, and we work with them to come up with a contract, and they're doing that. I am very supportive of all residents of Glendale having access to information. And I'm really kind of done listening to the attacks on FRAC. I really am. I don't think it's fair. And the one last point I wanted to make is, what I was saying, Councilmember Aldama, was that not that we have to have a discussion on our policy. Last time we built a recreation center was built around fair revenue recovery. And what I'm saying is, we need to have a discussion whether we're going to change that policy, whether we're going to build facilities around the idea of recovering revenue. I understand the disparity and how we would structure that, but that's if we're going to be building multiple facilities, do we still want that for facilities? That where the idea is to recover as much revenue as possible, or we're just going to say these are basically stop losses for our community, the things that we deliver to residents, just like libraries, where it's just a cost. There's no revenue. We're not expecting, it's a nice surprise if you can generate enough revenue to offset something. And one last thing I want to say is, little does people know that FRAC paid its own electric bill until I think 2 years ago, which was over $200,000 a year. It was the only facility, I think, in the city that paid its own electric bill because it was set up as a revenue recovery. And that was part of so it was supposed to recover, the revenue was supposed to cover as much of the cost of operating the center as it could. And that's why it paid its own utility bill. So I feel like if we're going to work together, we need to stop attacking things each other's have in their districts and look forward to what we can do to deliver the best experience, indoor, outdoor, everywhere in Glendale, to every resident of Glendale.
Mayor.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Thomas, I certainly wasn't attacking you. You just mentioned something on a fee base, so I mentioned it. So if you took it that way, I apologize. Because I'm done, folks. This report did it all for me. I'm putting that, I feel like for me that's put to bed. We'll follow it through as the mayor suggested. We have policies that we have to create and funding mechanisms. So this whole issue is put to bed for me. I'm done. With that said, I failed to mention this, and this will just sum up. It's the conclusion from Kerry's report and staff's report. And let me read it because it's really what we have to do. Conclusion. With this better understanding of differences in level of services, Glendale can develop policies and operational practices that ensure City of Glendale is being attentive and responsive to these disparities. That's it, folks. You did the work. Let us create policies and find the funding that will help these disparities throughout the city. So I'm putting it to bed and rest, and I'll go on to the next issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Rios.
Mayor, if I could, just to kind of wrap this up maybe a little bit, I did want to thank everyone for all of their comments. This is what we were sort of looking for, I think, is your feedback and your comments. I did also want to mention that we recognize, and I think the report showed that we have a lot of work to do. That's our takeaway, that as an organization, as a city, and as a staff for our parks, we have a lot of work to do. We did, to that end, request from this council about $500,000 in new funding for parks in this city manager's budget, because again, we recognize that the parks need attention. There's a couple of FTEs in there. We have also added contract monitoring for some of these contracts so that we can do what you're asking, which is to determine, is it better insourced or outsourced? And we've set some performance metrics and some things in there to also help with that. We'll take a look at some of the things. Jim and I have been making notes, and we'll get back with Kerry to talk about some of these numbers and adjustments if they're appropriate and how we might make them. But we feel that this discussion has been very good, I think, and we appreciate the feedback very much. So thank you.
And Mr. Burke, I'd like to finish up with thanking you for walking into the lion's den. I know that you get blamed frequently for a lot of things that you a lot of times don't have control over, and it comes back, and I think that I'm going to try to take the blame here. If we don't fund you in what you need to get your job done, it's hard to get your job done. And if we don't set standards of where we want those standards, the parks to be at a certain level, and you're trying to make everything work, well, that standard's gonna drop. I get that, I understand that. So I apologize for the fact that I think that this council really truly wants our parks to be the best in the state. It's gonna take us a while to get there, you know that. We have a lot of other challenges. But I think we're on the right track, and if you'd pass it to your staff, thank them for the work they do. I know that most of the time it goes very unrewarded, so we do appreciate your staff very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mayor, and I'm sure a bunch of them are watching this, so they've heard you.
Mayor, I would like to echo your remarks and convey to Kerry and Jim that the report is excellent. It was very well done. Both the disparity report and the draft report contains a lot of useful information that can be statistically or anecdotally backed up. And I think that's critical to creating the value of any report that is presented. So I wanted to thank you both for the work, the time, the effort that was put into this report and the disparity report, and want you to know that it was well received. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Two things on my mind. One is I want to say that I think that Councilmember Tomachoff made some excellent points when she had the floor a moment ago, and I'm going to leave that at that. And the other is that the council and park staff went on a tour of some parks. It's probably been a year or so ago to see conditions and all of that. And one of the big takeaways was, call it a grassroots takeaway, is that so much of our parks aren't really grass. We're mowing weeds out there, and that's what's keeping things green. I didn't notice, and I'll apologize if it is in here, but I didn't notice anything in here that specifically addressed the turf condition of our parks citywide. I do think that that's a goal we should have, to get our park turf back into quality shape over the next 10 years, so that the next time a master plan's done. But I would like to see if we can't work that into the master plan as well. Thank you.
No, sir, not today. Thank you very much.
Kerry, how about you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to respond to the last comment, we do, the park maintenance standards start to get to turf conditions. And I think that is actually, that and irrigation issues, which are leading to the turf conditions, is a very salient point. And it is mentioned in this plan and in the action plan to try and get up to those standards. So that's tied with that, council member. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Kerry.
Who's heard to talk? Okay, we'll go ahead and introduce item number 3.
Item 3, pavement restoration fee and pavement cut restrictions introduction.
Mayor, members of the council, here to lead the staff report is Trevor Ebersol, our Director of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Today, Don Bessler and I are going to present to Mayor and Council our proposal for a pavement cut ordinance. We have, for our pavement cut ordinance, we have transportation overseeing the overall transportation system and engineering managing the permitting program. So Don and I are going to bounce off of each other throughout this presentation. So there's two things that we're seeking from council today from this presentation. One is consensus for us to share our draft ordinance with our utility companies and stakeholders. The second item that we're seeking today from council is consensus to move this draft ordinance forward to a final draft version and then ultimately for council adoption.
Thank you, Mayor. Want to be clear what we're trying to achieve with a proposed ordinance, really specifically about the purpose. It's to make sure that we have a policy in place to preserve the incredible amount of investment that the city has made and is now making on our street program. So We know that when we start putting cuts into pavement, it can reduce the longevity of the pavement life from anywhere from 15 to 23%, especially if the fix is not better, the cure is not as bad as the actual disease. And so this speaks to the quality of the way we're going to approach pavement cutting. Trevor's going to show you some examples of that in just a moment. We want to make sure, as I said, to improve the life cycle performance of our asphalt. We want to make sure that we're consistent with other valley jurisdictions. You've heard me say a number of times that we have many right-of-way partners in the form of telecoms and other utility providers. They cross over all of the jurisdictional municipal boundaries in the valley for the most part, and they're always looking for consistency and fairness in the way we apply our rules. So we would look to make sure that our ordinance, if we brought back to you, would be the same. And we want to protect our brand, and what we mean by that is Glendale is becoming more and more known for setting the bar high. And the way we manage our street, all of the activities that take place out in our public right-of-way, whether it's done by the city or permitted by the city or in reaction to some other party working in the right-of-way, most people think it's the city that's behind the thought process on how that all works. So as we go forward with this, we want to make sure that we protect our brand on being a well-run city, a city that cares, and a city that's good for quality of life and commerce.
So we have several challenges that we're facing right now with our current street infrastructure revitalization program. We're experiencing challenges with the workmanship that goes on. Some on the pictures here, some of the repairs are nominal at best. They're not up to our standard. So we're trying to get a better handle of that. We're drafting into the ordinance the very specific parameters on what's expected, what the specifications should be, what the width should be, what the compaction should be. So there's a lot of very specific parameters that we're going to be covering in the draft ordinance. Other challenges that we're facing are the timing of these existing street cuts that happen. This particular street cut happened after we just provided the treatment on the street. So then they cut it, we put a slurry down, they cut into the street, and now there's a patch exposed. So we're trying to avoid that with this ordinance. We've drafted into the proposed ordinance that upon a street maintenance activity, there is no cutting of that street for a 2-year period for the exception of an emergency basis. If an emergency arises, then we'll permit the cut. In addition to that, we're suggesting in our draft ordinance that only one street cut per year is allowed in that particular segment. So we're really hoping to mitigate these types of street cuts.
Mr. Epsall, a quick question. Does that include horizontal drilling if they don't cut the pavement?
Mayor and Council, yes. And this next slide will show you why. So here's the next challenge. To the mayor's point, the horizontal drilling or directional drilling, it requires potholes. So if a utility company comes in or a company comes in and has to put their product down the center of the curb lane of a street, they're required to expose the product that they're wishing, or the line that they want to run with that drill bit. So they have to, in order to do that, they have to use potholing. So they have to expose they cut a 2-foot square hole into the asphalt, use a vacuum truck and vacuum out the base soil to expose the conduit or the drill bit that they're putting down the line. That top left photo has some arrows pointing to it. So in a 1/4-mile segment, the company might be required to put a pothole every 100 feet. So that's 13 potholes in just that 1/4-mile segment. So if there's more than one contractor doing that same kind of work, you're going to have excessive cutting in the street segment, and that relates to or equates to poor rideability of the street, the aesthetic appeal, degradation of the street. So we're trying to mitigate all of that.
Okay, actually, my question was, would it include horizontal drilling if it does not include cutting of the road? In other words, going across a road from dirt to dirt?
Mayor and Council, then if there is no potholing included, then that would be allowed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
here's another challenge or a display of example of challenges. This is excessive cutting. I alluded to it on the previous slide. This is where there's multiple companies coming in and doing their projects, one right after another, and you have this plethora of patchwork throughout the small street segment. So the good thing about this particular location was the timing was done, or the repairs were done prior to the street being treated. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking to do. We're looking to collaborate with the utility companies and schedule our repairs, or schedule all the repairs and project work prior to the streets being treated.
As you can see, and per the point that Mr. Ebersol just made, it takes a tremendous amount of collaboration. Probably about a month and a half ago, myself and Ryan Lee, the manager of your InterGov office, gave a presentation to you on telecom and 5G. And we talked about a quarterly coordinating meeting that we've started having now with the telecoms and the dry utility providers. We have another one coming up in a couple of weeks, and it's really our way of sharing the capital improvement program, what your 5-year planning looks like, typically between water and the transportation department as our two bigs. And we try to make sure that we let these major utilities know what our work looks like so that we can forestall unnecessary cutting. That said, last year we issued 1,200 permits for cutting. That wasn't 1,200 cuts, but 1,200 permits that resulted in either a single or multiple cuts. So it's a tremendous amount of coordination, but it's going to be our intent to try to continue to do that. And an ordinance that we'll be proposing to you will help strengthen that. The goals for the program, I got a little off of my sheets here, but the goals to coordinate the work, as I said, to minimize the cuts, eliminate cuts to new construction, and make sure that we've got a very specific established standard for integrity. And so what that means is that depending on the circumstance, whether it be an arterial or a collector or a local street, it will have very specific standards on what the repair would look like. It could be a mill and overlay for up to 50 feet on either side of the excavation. On an arterial, or I'm sorry, on a collector, it could be 25 feet. So there'll be standards that will be like standards from the valley that we would be looking at to really make sure that if we do have cuts, that it doesn't look like a patchwork of things, as Mr. Ebersol has been showing you, but actually something that's going to stand the test of time. We've got strategies, as I said, to partner in coordination with our utility companies. We'll continue to work with our InterGov. We also want to be and have started sharing our draft and our adopted 5-year CIPs. Again, what that does is it puts some of the larger utilities that are looking at major utility work on notice that here's an arterial that's going to be rebuilt. Please take that into consideration as you, and let us know if you have major extension plans so that that might influence the timing of some of our arterial projects. We want to disincentivize non-emergency cuts. What that will look like, we'll come back in an ordinance to you. It will have time periods from what happens in the first year after a reconstruct, years 2 through 5, and it will be, again, similar to what they would experience across the valley. And we want to make sure, as I said, that the restoration is actually significant to the investment that we've made in the city street system. We will make sure that these are the main features that will find its way into the ordinance, that there'll be a clear purpose to establish our intentions, our policy intentions, that there'll be very clear definitions to make sure there's a shared understanding of the terms that we use when we're talking about what street repairs, patches, cuts, and the like would look like. We want restrictions to ensure public trust. As you all know, as elected officials, probably the least popular thing you might find yourself answering to is very poorly timed street restrictions and street cutting right after a brand new road has been put down. Again, while it may have not been something that was initiated by the city, we're the ones that are expected to manage it smartly. We want to make sure that we have specifications that will actually withhold the test of time, and that we're going to properly supervise and inspect the work so that it's done properly.
So what are our neighbors doing? Several of our neighbors have already a pavement cut ordinance in place. So we've gathered those ordinances and use them as a model to take the best parts of those ordinances to create our draft ordinance. So we're ensuring through the research of their ordinances that our ordinance is consistent and fair as our regional neighbors are.
This is just an example of what we have for standard detail in our current documents. They would make themselves attached by reference to an ordinance that we would bring back to you.
And that, Mayor and Council, we're at the end of our presentation. So the two things that we're looking for from Council today is we're seeking consensus for the authorization to share our draft ordinance with our stakeholders, the utility companies. And we're also seeking consensus from Council to move this draft ordinance into the next step where we come back to Council, present a final draft, and then ultimately seek a voting meeting for final Council adoption. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. To both of you, thank you for bringing this. This is genius, something we've probably all looked at and just never really thought about creating an ordinance for it. About time, and that's not a negative trait. It's about time we're doing this. So I'm very supportive of it. Question: do any of the cities that you have listed here, or neighboring cities, have a fee to any utility companies who are so just a fee for bad players who don't follow the rules if there was an ordinance, and any fee-based restrictions at all?
Mayor, council member, that's a very standard feature in this, and it's a sliding scale so that the sooner that you come back for a non-emergency cut within a 5-year window, typically, it's more disincentivizing that sort of activity, but they all have them. We'll come back with a slate of what we think would be fees that would be representative of the valley.
Okay, I'm all on board with it. Long overdue and really needed. Thank you for bringing this forward and thinking about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen. I do want to weigh in on this, that it's not just the cut and the surface appearance. I want an assurance that our reconstruction standard that we require is consistent with the quality of the street that they're digging into. As many of you may recall, I had kind of barked about the cost of reconstructed Glendale Avenue from 91st to 95th. I think, as I recall, it's somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range. Typical arterial like that should last 30 years. This one's barely 20 years old. I asked staff to justify it. They came back to me and showed me told me of a pavement condition index of, I think, about 38 or something like that, which is miserable. And I'm told that it's due to the excessive number of road cuts there, and then I can't help but assume it's also because they're not being reconstructed to the standard that will keep them from being a problem. So if we have, that's just a half a mile, and we're going to spend somewhere between $2 and $3 million on it, and it's only 2/3 of the lifespan that it should have. That's real money out of the pockets of our residents, and we need to protect them better than that. I do want to mention that I understand that we are ourselves, and when we're doing road work, we're stubbing out, they call it, mains and other things to the curb line or the right-of-way, so that on the newer street work we're doing, hopefully there'll be fewer needs to go cut all the way back to the main just to be able to bring out a water line or something like that. So that's good news for our residents as well. The other concern I had, I think you've addressed, and that's the notification of the utilities that share our roadways for their subterranean services, and we just need to make sure we're letting them know ahead of time so that if they have to do a cut, it's on them, not us. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Member Tomachoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I know you both are well aware this is a pet peeve of mine, and I recognize some of these pictures. You didn't get permission to use these. I'm just kidding. I didn't see in the ordinance, and obviously, I mean, I won't repeat what the conversation that Don and I had about the work on slide 4, but that you can see if you look closely at that was a residential street that had just received treatment And then a utility came in and did that and left a street like that. And one of the issues that the residents had, though, is that they hadn't even been notified that the work was occurring. So I wanted to know if we were going to put a requirement in there for notification of, like we do with other contractors when they're doing, that put door hangers or notify the residents that this work's going to be happening, and that give them a timetable that, you know, we're going to come back and fix this. So people thought, I mean, that I was told anyway, and they did come back and fix it, that their intention all along was not to leave it like this. But, you know, people are coming and going in and out of their neighborhood, and they haven't even been notified what's happening, who's doing it, and what's the timetable. When is it gonna stop, and when it start, and when is it gonna stop? So I don't know if that's what other cities have done and put that in their ordinance, but notifying residents is important too.
Right. Mayor and council members, the notification will be a component of the ordinance. And we also have our barricade management team that the contractors need to submit their traffic control plans to and their workload to. So we'll have those mitigations in place.
Just adding on to what Councilmember Tomshoff just talked about, I'm not a huge fan of sending out letters because I think most people pitch them. But I love the fact of the electronic billboards that tell people a week ahead of time or 2 weeks ahead of time, during this time there will be construction during these hours. I think those are incredibly efficient. Usually after you show up that first day and you go, oh yeah, I forgot. But I do think they accomplish more. I don't know if they're more cost effective or not, but there's a lot of people that don't even live in homes in the area that utilize those same roads. So getting that message out would allow you to get the message out, I think, to a larger audience. So I'm not sure how you guys do that, but just food for thought.
Thank you.
Mayor,
questions?
council member, just on the notification, we couldn't agree with you more. Absent information, people either fear the worst or fill in the blanks, and neither one of those things help. So our existing permitting processes, whether it be for utility cuts or other elements of dry utilities, have a notification requirement. That said, absolutely it happens with these 1,200 permits a year that a subcontractor doesn't put out a good notification. Typically they use door hangers. I know that we fielded a call one time where we had a message board and it had the wrong dates or something on it. I forget what it was, but it wasn't good. But we hear you loud and clear that more information is much better than the alternative.
All right, cool. Consensus? There you go.
Great, thank you.
And the last item.
Item 4, council item of special interest, Glendale 1.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report will be the executive assistant to the city manager, Amy Hanlong, and she'll be assisted by our director of community services, Jean Marino.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So today's presentation is in response to a council item of special interest raised by Councilmember Tolmatroff. I'm requesting just an informational update on the overall performance of Glendale 1, which is our new service request system. So in preparation for this presentation today, I had the opportunity to take a little trip down memory lane. And so for those of you that are just tuning in, Glendale 1 replaced an old system that we used to have. It was an in-house system. It was called the Request for Service System, or as most people knew it, the RFS system. That particular system dated back to 1994. In October 2017, Councilmember Clark actually requested a council item of special interest to ask staff to take a look and see if that system could be replaced. And at that particular time, it was obviously over 20 years old, so it was something that we really took advantage of, the opportunity to really investigate and see if we could make some changes to that system. So at that point, the system had not been well utilized for about 2 years because it was cumbersome, it was difficult to track, it was still very email-based. And so it was a great opportunity for us to look at. Before we began looking at the replacement system, we surveyed departments, and we specifically wanted to find out from them, how were they tracking service requests outside of the RFS system? Were they actively using the RFS system? And 50% of departments reported having some other web-based form, like a jot form as an example, for customers to request service. The rest of the departments were reliant on citizens to call them to request a service. So that meant that a citizen had to know what department provided that service in order to really request what they needed. When they were asked if they were tracking outcomes of those requests that they received, about 23% of departments reported that they were not. They just didn't have a system to track outcomes of what happened to a request after it came in. For those that were tracking requests, only about 64% reported that all requests that came into their department were being tracked. So that's really important. Those are two very important pieces of information, because what that demonstrated to us when we started looking at the system is we needed something that was more comprehensive and an enterprise-level solution that would help us capture a majority of service requests that were coming in, but not only when they were coming in and who they were assigned to, but what the outcome was. The most striking piece of information from that departmental survey, however, was 100% of all departments reported that the process for accepting and tracking all of their service requests was 100% manual. So every department, including the mayor and council staff, all departments across the organization, they were involved in documenting what we needed in the system. And that team of people consisted of about 40 people, employees at all levels of the organization, all departments, and they documented about 78 system requirements. And when we talk about system requirements, those are things that employees who work with customers on a day-to-day basis identified as critical to being able to improve service for our citizens. Over 25 products were researched. We shortlisted about 3 for demonstrations. All of those departments that were involved in identifying the system requirements were asked to participate in those demonstrations and make an ultimate recommendation on the solution that we ultimately selected, which was the Q Alert product. And we've since branded that as Glendale 1. So Ms. Hanlong is going to talk today and present you some information about how we've been utilizing the system and the overall accomplishments that we've seen from the system. But before I turn the presentation over to her, I would like to provide one specific point of reference. In 21 years of use, the RFS system captured a total of 15,934 requests for service, or about 758 per year. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Hanlong.
I need to be closer to it. We launched Glendale 1 just over a year ago, and since our launch, we've received over 27,000 requests. So what that number represents is 27,700 requests that previously we weren't easily able to identify or report out on. So they were in jot forms, spreadsheets, people's inboxes, sticky notes on people's desks. There was no way for us to easily gather that information. Some of the key features of the system include a centralized tracking mechanism. So regardless of how the request comes into the city, it gets entered into the system and routed to the appropriate department. All of our updates and activities regarding that request are tracked in one central location, and all of our call takers are able to pull those requests up. So if someone were to call the city manager's office, let's say, and ask for an update on their request, as a call taker, I'm able to pull that up and provide them an update. Each request is built with a route group. The benefit of that feature is that the requests go to a group of people rather than just one person. So previously, if we were just going to send an email to one person, if they happened to be out, it would sit in their inbox until they returned. With the system, it goes to a group of people, so we ensure that those requests are getting attention. Additionally, each service request is built with escalations. Escalations are built on our service level expectations. So the amount of time that we've established that we strive to complete any given request. If that service request is not completed in the time that we've established, it does escalate up to a supervisor, and it'll continue to escalate until it's resolved all the way up to the city manager's office. The benefit of that is it allows supervisors to address any workload or capacity issues. It ensures that we don't miss requests and overlook them. And it also may be a sign that we need to do some communication. So maybe we had a recent storm and we had a lot of downed trees, so we're not meeting our normal service level expectation. That gives us an opportunity to communicate it back out to our customers that it's going to take us a little longer to address their concerns than we normally would. Requests, responses, and activities are provided to the customer in real time. So as soon as we enter an update and we save it, it does provide that update to the customer. Customers can choose their notification preference. So there's text messaging, email, or automated voice call. We do walk them through those options when they call in. I provided a sample script with the attachments. And they also, if they're entering it, they have that same option to choose their notification preferences, and those can be adjusted at any time. So if they had selected text message and now they prefer email, we can update those at any time. The system also allows for internal notices. So this is great if there was a water main break or a traffic incident or something that might be generating a lot of phone calls. We can put an internal notice in the system, so as we're taking those calls, we can quickly provide an update to the caller and hopefully eliminate some unnecessary requests in the system for something we're actively working. And we've also created a robust knowledge base that includes informational articles where people can go find kind of like a Q&A, they can go find some information. So some enhancements that we've made based on feedback that we've received, we did create a video tutorial on how to enter a request that is posted on our public portal. For anyone that's not familiar with the system, they can watch a quick video tutorial. Another feature that was added is an on-hold feature based on some feedback that the vendor received from their customers was the need for an on-hold feature. The on-hold feature allows us to put a request on hold if we're waiting for a vendor to complete some work, maybe we need additional information before we can work the ticket, or perhaps it's a budgeted item. So let's say it's a pavement management request. We know it's budgeted in July and we should get to it in July. We can put that request on hold, and that way we ensure we don't forget about it, and we also make sure we communicate back to the original requester. When that on-hold feature was initiated, it's date-based, so we do set a date on when we want it to resume. That was resuming at midnight when the date changed. So it was sending notifications out at midnight, 1 in the morning via text message for those that selected that notification preference. So based on feedback we got, we did work with the vendor to have that changed. And they created an hours rule. So now text messages will only be sent between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Anything outside of those hours will be held until those notification hours go on. Activities into the system, when we enter an activity in the system, to get that notification to go to the requester, we had to check a box to notify the requester. We have changed the default in the system to have that box always checked so that we make sure we're providing timely updates to the requester. We were also able to customize the system, so there are unique fields that are needed to work certain requests. We've been able to add those customizations into the system. And we've created custom reusable comments to ensure consistent messaging across departments. Since the launch of the system, we have trained over 500 employees on system and customer service training. We do hold a monthly Glendale 1 team meeting. It comprised of 17 employees across 12 departments. And it's an opportunity for us to talk about any additional training that might be needed, any pain points or system enhancements that we could make. Through that group, it was determined that we did need a city administrative policy and a best practices document to help govern the use of the system. That best practices document is a working or living document, so we do frequently revisit it and make any adjustments as needed. We've also created a very robust employee SharePoint site with Q&As, how-tos, scripts, anything an employee new to the system might need. And then now we have data that we can actually report out on. So we do have 2 public-facing Glendale 1 dashboards. The first one we'll talk about is our service level expectations dashboard. And this is where we've posted all of our service level agreements for each of our requests. So that's based on the escalation, and that's again based on what we think that we can strive to accomplish that. So for example, for graffiti, we strive to address that issue within 4 business days, but something that may take a little more time to resolve, like a pedestrian streetlight issue, we strive to complete that within 15 days. So all of our requests on there, this is scrollable on the live site. Unfortunately, this is just a snapshot of it. Next, we'll talk about our performance dashboard. So as you can see, we've got our running total since we launched the system. Again, this is a snapshot in time. These numbers have been updated since I created the PowerPoint. Below that is a rolling 12-month period. So in the last 12 months, we have taken in 19,321 requests and closed out 19,177. We do strive to keep that number below 2% because that's just showing that we're managing our workload. If that number were to get out of balance, it could be a capacity issue that we need to, or a resource issue that we need to address. The next section shows what's currently open. So we have our current open requests and those that are on hold. Again, those could be on hold for various reasons. And then we have requests by district. And as you can see, requests by districts are generated pretty equally across all districts. And then another metric that's been kind of fun to watch grow is how people are entering those requests. So is it coming in through an email or a phone call to an employee, or is it being entered by the customer? So we have a little over 35% customer entry, which is pretty good utilization, and hope that that will continue to grow. And then the last portion of this dashboard is our performance metrics. We have categorized our service requests based on the amount of time it takes to close them out. So low complexity, we close out in 1 to 5 days, medium 6 to 10, and high 11 to 20. And then as you can see, next to that is our average performance. So this is an indicator to us that there might be an opportunity for us to adjust our service level agreements. And then below that is our escalated requests. And although we set some pretty aggressive goals when we set the system up, we're pretty happy with where we're at and continue to strive to meet those goals. So we are continuing to do refresher training on the system and customer service. Departments are utilizing their data to make decisions about their business plan, and if there's any service adjustments that need to be made to their agreement, to their service level agreements, or to their requests within the system. We are going to do another refresh on our marketing campaign to bring awareness to the system. We are working to develop and deploy a customer satisfaction survey that'll be integrated into the system. And kind of been fun, some neighboring cities have reached out to us looking for some assistance. So Avondale has actually launched the Q Alert program, and City of Peoria is reviewing that as one of their options. So that concludes our presentation, and we're available for questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, ladies, for the presentation. I did a little survey in my newsletter a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, just to ask residents if they've used it and what their feedback was, and it was all very positive. So congratulations, it's working well. I do have a couple of maybe technical questions. The hold issue, so is there a, say, 30 days goes by or 60 days or whatever, are there settings in there where it reminds the person that you have this issue on hold? Or how does the hold issue work?
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmatroff, when an employee puts a service request on hold, they specifically have to, the system forces them to define a date on which it needs to be checked again, and then departments are responsible for monitoring all of their service requests are on hold. When that date comes, so as an example, if I said, okay, I want to recheck this on May 1st because I'm expecting to receive some information, when that request comes off hold, I will automatically, if I'm the person that's assigned to that service request in that route group, I will automatically receive a notification that says this request is now off hold, and then that prompts me to go in and look at the system and say, okay, do I have enough information to continue and proceed with this? Do I need to reach back out to the customer, et cetera? So the system is designed to provide those automated prompts so we don't lose that request. So it's not possible to put a request on hold and then it gets lost because it automatically will come off hold and it will escalate. So if, as an example, I got that email on May 1st and I didn't do anything with it, it will escalate within that time frame that has been set with those service level agreements so that things don't get lost.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad. I mean, I know, as we were rolling it out, we kind of, like anything you learn as you go. So the best practices, I think, because I think in the beginning, there was a lot of different ways people were managing the system, but I've noticed myself anyway, a lot more higher level of consistency, which if you're not the person, if you're just looking to see what's going on with the service request, all the information goes in there, then it's easy to see what's going on rather than emailed residents. So I see that the consistency level has increased, and the being able to look at something and understand where it is or what's happening is a lot better. But I did, one other thing is, Mayor, if I could continue, for example, graffiti. Is there a different turnaround time if it's profane, things like that, or is there a way to escalate something like that?
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmatroff, all of the automated escalations are designed based around what we said that service level of agreement was. So if as an example on graffiti, and I don't recall right off the top of my head what that turnaround time is, but if we said we're going to respond to graffiti requests within 2 days, if there is not action taken on that within 2 days, it will automatically escalate. In terms of the specifics of identifying, profanity, there's no level, no different level within that particular service level agreement, but we can certainly follow up with the department.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's been, I don't know if it's because of, people being home or whatever, but at least I've noticed an increased level in graphic pictures in parks and profane graffiti, more than I've noticed in the previous 5 years. So, especially in a park or someplace where you're gonna have children. And I mean, the staff's been very responsive, but I just wanted to know if the resident just puts it in just as graffiti, is there some box or something that you can check that it is, very offensive and it's in a park where children might see it. So I just didn't know if that was something, there was another level for graffiti, because some of the stuff is pretty terrible.
Kellner.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I would like to thank the folks involved in getting this program set up. When Councilmember Clark brought this idea up, I really felt like it was something that needed to happen, and I was really happy to see we moved quickly on it. We got the program installed. There were a few bumps along the way, as we all experienced, but I think overall the program has been very, very successful. The one thing that I'm very much impressed with, and which I would like to see us promote a little bit more, is the app. I know we've promoted it somewhat, but just as an example, I was walking my neighborhood and ran into a neighbor who pulled me over and said, "Hey, come and look at this." And there was a big hole in his sidewalk, and I said, "Well, let me show you what we can do about that." I took out my camera, I took a picture, and I sent it off, and they sent me a thank you note later that it had been taken care of. That's how quickly the app can be used. But the app has a lot more features to it than what you've talked about here today. I mean, some of the things that I use very regular are, for example, the bulk trash. I need to make sure that I know when bulk trash is, and I inform my neighbors. I got all my neighbors. I get them all a card. Say, you want to know when bulk trash is? Get on the Glendale 1, and here it is. Black and white. I have not seen, since I did that on my street, anybody put out bulk trash on a day they weren't supposed to. And so it really works. Other features on the Glendale 1 app are the recreation classes, the knowledge base. You need to know something about Glendale, the paying your bill, and library events. So I think the program is really fantastic. I'm really pleased with what's happened so far, and I would just urge that our citizens really jump on board so that we can reduce that number of employees inputting into the system to where citizens who have concerns, and I take every opportunity I can when someone calls in a concern to let them know about Glendale 1. Because it is a fantastic opportunity for us to improve our city and to do what we have set out in our goals. Thank you.
I think your neighbors are waiting to see you put it out first before they put theirs out. Councilmember Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I use it myself. It has gotten better. Early on, I had a couple of vague responses, and I'm like, I don't really know what that means. But everything lately has been check mark. It's done. So I'm happy about that. In fact, I put one in on Sunday, and I got the message this morning that it had been fixed. So that's pretty quick turnaround. Happy about that. On slide number 9, though, I just have a question about the the employee entry. Is that an employee who sees something and puts it in themselves, or is that them receiving a phone call? It could be a council assistant or a management assistant or somebody Which exactly is it, or is it both?
Mayor and Councilmember Turner, the majority of it is that someone's receiving a phone call and they're entering it on behalf of the citizen that's calling. But we have had employees reporting things, and that's the one thing that is beneficial of this tool is anybody can use it, regardless of whether you're a Glendale citizen. So if an employee sees something that needs to be repaired, I've seen a few that have come through for my department. But the majority of it is that someone's receiving a phone call and they're or an email, and they're entering that as a service request on behalf of the citizen.
And if I could, Mayor, so then if that's the case, that might explain why there's so many more that are coming in through the computer portal rather than through the app itself, because those employees probably have that right there at their desktop that they're working on. Because I was surprised the app usage was so low. So like Councilmember Malner, I push that app to people as much as possible. Thanks.
Member Clerk.
Thank you. Jean and Amy, I love the program. I didn't think I would, because I was an old diehard RFS system and like to contact department people directly when I received a constituent complaint. But I have got to tell you that I am very pleased with the system, and the quick run-up to the system, I'd like to think was my nagging Jean all the time about how soon can we get it done. I do have one question, however, and I think it relates mostly to code complaints. The customer, the resident, receives an answer back that this code complaint is resolved or closed, or it says closed, and that it has been resolved or whatever. But a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes, I don't think the answer for the closure of the complaint is robust enough. Because sometimes people think that, well, the city may think it's closed, but I don't think it's closed, or it wasn't handled effectively enough. So I wonder if, and I can't remember right now off the top of my head, when, for example, a code complaint is closed, do you offer that resident the opportunity to check a box and say, yes, I'm satisfied, or no, I'm not satisfied, because it would give you quick feedback in terms of not only how quickly we respond, which I think a lot of this program is set up to do, but how effectively the solutions are to the complaint. So do we have that feature? I can't remember.
Mayor and Councilmember Clark, that is not a system feature at this time. It's something that we've talked about needing to have a mechanism to gather, like a survey, were you satisfied with the response? At this point, it's not something that the vendor is offering, although we will continue to monitor their updates and see if that becomes available in the future.
Mayor, I think that's the critical element that's missing. If you want performance data, the way you get performance data is to ask the complainant, was this resolved satisfactorily? That's the best performance data I can think of in the world. So I would ask that you continue to, as a euphemism, nag the vendor in adding that kind of feature. I think it's important and critical to the program. Thank you.
I guess my comment is, I remember when this was first introduced, and it seemed like there was an awful lot of pushback. I do know that my office receives an awful lot of phone calls, and one of the things that the office has tried to do is educate our citizens and the people that call on giving them the information on how to do that themselves. But I can tell you frequently, our office is the ones that are making those calls and making those entries. So Again, to the staff, the people that carried it out, sorry you took a beating initially, but you got your praise today. So good job. Good job. Mr. Phelps.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you all for your comments. Just a couple quick things. Actually, with regards to the usage by the public of self-inputting, we're actually quite a bit ahead of the benchmarks that we had set. Because when you look at it, so far, just in the first 12 months, we're almost 1/3 of the inputting is coming from the public. That is remarkably high from the goals that we had set here, and so we're going to continue to roll that out. And again, we appreciate all of you in your newsletters, and as you just mentioned, Mayor, about taking the time, as Councilmember Malnar has done, to explain this to your citizens. But actually, we're well ahead of where we thought we would be, and of course, where we want to be is we want to be significantly higher on that, and we'll continue, as Amy mentioned in her presentation. We're going to continue to kind of help promote and to roll that out. I also appreciate the Councilmember Malnar's discussion about the other features that are in there. And one of the things I've been most impressed by the team is they're continually looking for ways to improve this system. And that's critical. They meet every month, and I think next year at this time we'll have incorporated additional changes and enhancements and improvements to it, and I really appreciate that. We had a lot of people that touched this, as Amy mentioned, but I do think it goes without saying that, really without the leadership that Amy and Jean has provided on this, we wouldn't be this far along. And I just want to acknowledge they really took this project to heart. They have a lot of personal ownership of the product, and they take a lot of pride in it, which they should. But again, in talking to other cities now, are hearing about our Glendale one, and we're starting to field a lot of calls of people saying, "What did it do? How did you do it? We want to be there." And of course, we want to improve the lives of people not only here in Glendale but in other surrounding cities. And so they've been very good about doing that. But good job, women. You guys have done a great job on bringing this together. And that's my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, actually, your city manager is up next.
Okay, well, I've only got one item in my report, but it's going to take a few minutes of your time, but I think you'll enjoy it. I don't think I have to tell the 7 members of the council of just all the tremendous changes that the city of Glendale has really seen over the last 5 or 6 years, especially since this leadership team has been in place. And I know that you talked to other cities and to other elected officials. And so what we wanted to do was be able to start telling our story here about all the transformation that's been taking place here in Glendale. And so we're going to show you a video. Now, this is one of what will be several different iterations of the video. This is the longest version, and then we're going to come up with some more targeted versions. But I want to show you really the work has been primarily led by Sue Breeding and Louis Jacinto, who put a lot of effort into this video. And so if it's okay, we'd like to just grab your attention for about 10 minutes. And I think, I hope that you will all be as proud when you start seeing all the things that have kind of taken place here. And this is now starting to become our brand. But could we turn all the lights off?
Gotta go the other way with them. There you go. Go ahead and get the other ones if you would.
They score! People love places where they can make memories, places offering a fun experience, and gathering options for them to come early or stay late. Glendale's Sports and Entertainment District is a premier destination for those world-class experiences. It's home for the Arizona Cardinals, Arizona Coyotes, and the Chicago White Sox and Los Angeles Dodgers during spring training. It's an exciting and vibrant hub and point of pride for the city.
And do you know what's remarkable? 20 years ago, this was vacant land. Now it's ground zero for one of the fastest growing areas in the entire state, with transformational growth booming all around it.
Let's go back to December of 2003. The Arizona Coyotes dropped the first puck in Gila River Arena, the city of Glendale's beautiful new state-of-the-art hockey and multi-purpose arena rose in the middle of farmland as an isolated vision of unlimited opportunity. Soon, Using sophisticated engineering and design, the iconic State Farm Stadium was built across the street. Westgate, the bustling complex of fun, evolved surrounding them, offering bars, shops, and restaurants. Then, a neighboring outdoor designer shopping mall was built. Collectively, this became known as the Sports and Entertainment District. Enjoy live music? Name a top act. This is where they come.
Keller with a shot, and he scores!
This is also Arizona's sports hub. Between the NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, and NASCAR racing, the West Valley is where the action is. Glendale hosted the NCAA Men's Final Four Championship in 2017. It's coming again in 2024. 2 past Super Bowls have been played here. The third is coming down the pike, slated for 2023.
There may not be a bigger event than the Super Bowl. And you want to be successful, you want to make sure that the fans who have come here have an experience that is memorable and will bring them back to the Valley.
C-L-E-M-S-O-N!
Our mega events range from NCAA college football championships and World Cup soccer to WrestleMania and monster trucks flying through the air.
We believe that with our sports entertainment district, we can do something that nobody else in the state of Arizona can replicate.
Crystal Lagoons Island Resort is an example of that. Work on building this amazing and unique project will begin soon. It will have themed islands, shops and restaurants, plus venue space, a family entertainment center, and amusement rides. Westgate is on an aggressive path forward, owned by successful entrepreneur Bob Parsons, who invested more than $130 million to acquire this prime real estate. New businesses are on their way, and existing national chains are reporting their top performing locations are here. Topgolf chose this area knowing it would provide them with one of the most profitable locations in their portfolio. And Topgolf's a great example of experiential entertainment. It is not just a place to golf and go. You can stay to eat, watch something on the big screen, and then head minutes away for outlet shopping. It is the kind of comprehensive day worthy of a snap and share.
The only sector in brick and mortar retail that has grown over the last decade has been experiential retail. Westgate Entertainment Sports District has all those elements that will attract the new generation, whether it be the X generation, millennial generations, to come here. And so we're excited about the future.
Across from Westgate, south of the new Desert Diamond Casino, and next to Cabela's, tenants of the Enfuego development will include new shops, restaurants, entertainment venues, and a hotel. Glendale's business boom includes multiple hotels. For Super Bowl 49, there were half a dozen hotels in this area. Before Super Bowl 57 arrives, Glendale will have doubled its available hotel rooms, meaning visitors to the Sports and Entertainment District can easily extend their stay and go back for more. The ripple effect has been seen all up and down the Loop 101 freeway beyond the Entertainment District. To the north, there is a hot spot for new luxury auto dealerships, BMW, Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo. There's the beautiful Arrowhead Lakes community, one of the most affluent residential areas in the valley, with nearby shopping and dining at Arrowhead Town Center, where sales per square foot are among the highest in the state. Nearby, new upscale rental housing options are going up to meet the demands of a growing millennial workforce. There's Luke Air Force Base, home to the F-35, the world's most technologically advanced fighter, and one of Major League Baseball's premier spring training facilities, Camelback Ranch, Glendale. Glendale is ideally located, neighboring Central Phoenix, and we have the room to welcome even more people and businesses. Celebrations opening a couple of new city roads are helping fuel the development. Ribbon was cut when Glendale completed the final stretch of Cardinals Way, extending Bethany Home Road from north central Phoenix to the Sports and Entertainment District. Also, Glendale built Ballpark Boulevard to connect Camelback Ranch Glendale to the Sports and Entertainment District and the Loop 101. Around Ballpark Boulevard is 300 acres ready for new office space and retail areas. And because people like to live where the fun is, new homes. Stonehaven homes are also going up in the shadow of the stadium. It's a new luxury housing development with an electric vehicle charging station in every garage. It is helping Glendale meet its sustainability goals. Heading west of the Sports and Entertainment District and up over the White Tanks Mountains, there is a whole new frontier with land as far as the eye can see and room to grow. There are business developments and master plan communities in the works and currently going up all the time. Eventually, this area will welcome more than 500,000 new residents. Commercial business growth is booming here along the Loop 303 freeway. It's due to Glendale's pro-business environment and expertise with bringing projects to life for companies quickly and easily, and the fact that West Valley cities are a model of cooperation with close relationships with groups like Maricopa Association of Governments and Westmark. That was key to attracting longtime partners Ball Corporation, Rao Fruit Juices, and energy drink Red Bull to invest in Glendale for their manufacturing facilities and distribution centers. To meet demand for its hard seltzer, White Claw built the largest, most technologically advanced brewery in North America here. Another global corporation, Amazon, selected Glendale's Loop 303 corridor for its new sortation center. Also, Park 303 brings 1 million square feet of Class A industrial space. The Camelback 303 development will be a $1.5 billion major development with manufacturing, industrial, and commercial space. All this development translates to more job opportunities. The completion of the Loop 303 freeway spurred this western development. And if you take an overview look of the valley's extensive highway loop transportation system, from every corner, all roads lead to Glendale. The Loop 202 swings by East Valley cities, and at the beginning of 2020, the Loop 202 extension opened, bringing those East Valley commuters to the Sports and Entertainment District easily. The Loop 101 circles around north by Scottsdale and Peoria for easy access for their commute to the fun. Interstate 10 makes the drive from downtown Phoenix skyscrapers to the west side of the Loop 101 and Entertainment District hassle-free. The roads are ready. Great infrastructure is here. There's plenty of land, and ground is constantly being broken.
The metamorphosis that took this from farmland to an entertainment mecca is only just the start. It is expected over the next 20 years that 1/3 of the state's population will call the greater West Valley around here home.
Glendale's future continues to be built around an economy that welcomes opportunities for experiences, including mega events. And our business success is setting the stage for new places to live, work, and play well into the future. The past has been an incredible ride, but stay tuned. The best is yet to come.
So, Mayor, thank you for the your attention. And again, we're going to be working on some different variations of this to kind of hit more targeted audiences. And if you've got some any kind of ideas, we know that you go out and speak a lot as a group and in front of the public, and we can certainly try to target products for you as well. And that does conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. You know, the one thing that I noticed in there, I don't know if anybody else paid much attention to, is the aerial view of the Chase Bank in downtown Phoenix, and the fact that you could see Glendale so clearly. And anybody that says it's too far away, All you gotta do is see that one photo and you go, okay, they're actually very, very close, so. I think it was a great production. Good job. Okay, city attorney's report.
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Council items of special interest. Each council member has the opportunity to indicate topics they'd like to have discussed at a future workshop. Councilmember Aldama.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one. I'm requesting that Econ Dev begin meeting with Robert Height to update the current deliverables in the downtown manager contract, also to include strategic marketing and promoting, and if they can start that soon. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Clark.
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Milner.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Tomchow.
Thing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Turner.
Not today, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay, and I have nothing, so again, I think it was a great video. Good job for everybody that worked on that. So can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Move.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Turner, second from from the Vice Mayor to go into executive session. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. Appears the ayes have it. Do have it. Motion carries. This council meeting is recessed for exec.